Abraham Lincoln said, any man can withstand adversity, but if you want to test the character of a man, give him power. Toxic leaders exist because strong leaders with integrity scare people. Toxic leaders want to control everything around them, including the people that work for them. Here's my take on toxic leaders and toxic workplaces. Let's go. Welcome back to the channel. For all my subscribers, thank you. You know, I'm bringing you content on topics that people like to talk about in law enforcement, but it really applies to a lot of workplaces in general. So let's tackle toxic workplaces and toxic leadership. In order to really get a good understanding, we have to go back to the animal kingdom. Because make no mistake, just because we live in buildings and drive cars and speak languages doesn't mean that this isn't the animal kingdom. And the greatest place to look at that is in a wolf pack. In a wolf pack, there's one alpha male, typically the father, and his authority is unquestioned. But in areas like law enforcement and sometimes in healthcare and even in business, the strong leader that you want, the alpha male, doesn't always make it to the top. And that's because the betas have a voice. And it's no different when it comes to positions of power. A beta at the top is not going to want an alpha below them that may challenge their authority. A beta is going to want another beta so that they can control them, because that's what betas do. They lay down. So in order to understand what kind of person you're working for, let me just define what alpha and beta leaders are, and we'll start with betas. A beta leader is going to be defined by their uniform that they wear, if we're talking about law enforcement, and the position that they hold. This position is what makes them. Without it, they are nothing. They have no real power in their personal lives. So when they come to work, they try to wield as much power as they can. Beta leaders are going to be poor communicators of vision, right? They may speak well, but their vision is going to be unclear. And why is that? Because they are unsure not only of themselves, but of what they should be doing. They fear having other people question their ideas. They're not strong in their opinions. Beta leaders are going to micromanage, right? They're going to try to put everything into a box. That way they can control who grows and who doesn't. And they can get ahead of those people that they ultimately fear that may take their position. And finally, beta leaders are going to, this is huge. This is probably the biggest one. Beta leaders are going to absolutely avoid confrontation. They cannot stomach confrontation, and it doesn't matter who it comes from. That's why you see beta leaders have an inability to answer questions, to be questioned. And let me just give you an example. Have you ever been at your place of employment, come across your boss in the hallway or the break room or something like that? You have a general conversation with them. It seems like a good conversation. And then an hour, 2 hours, the next day, you get an email from someone beneath them telling you something that your boss didn't like that they saw in you. Whether it could have been your uniform or something you said or something you were doing, right? Beta leaders are going to avoid confrontation, and they are going to hide behind the chain of command at every turn. If this sounds like someone that you're working for, stick around. I'm going to give you a couple tips on how to dominate this workplace and still work with them. Now, conversely, an alpha leader is not defined by their uniform or their title or their rank. Doesn't matter. because these people are off the job, right? They're well respected by the people in their communities, on the job, off the job, friends. They're alpha 24/7. They just command that type of respect. Their vision is going to be crystal clear. Their directives are going to be clear. You're going to know exactly what they want you to do, and you're going to do it. Why? Because alpha leaders display an aura of trust, as opposed to betas who make people feel scared because they know they don't have their backs. Alpha leaders are going to want their people to grow because they understand that happy employees are challenged and mentored, and ultimately they are trained to take over for the alpha. So people are going to want to come to work for alpha leaderships. If you've ever had an alpha leader, God bless it. Don't you just miss them? Seriously, don't you compare every other leader that you've had to that one or two alpha leaders that you've had that just made coming to work fun. They were strong in their ideas, they cared about you, and you wanted to run through a brick wall for them. I've had a few of those throughout my entire work career, not just as a police officer, and I do miss those people. Finally, alpha leaders are not going to avoid confrontation. Listen to me. They will embrace confrontation. They love it. The problem is they don't get approached that way, right? Alphas approach alphas with respect, and betas certainly approach alphas because they are afraid of them with respect. You can walk into an alpha leader's office and they will listen to what you have to say, engage you in conversation, and you will walk away feeling not only heard, but validated. This is the world that we live in. There's going to be, beta leadership more so than there's going to be alpha leadership. And all we can really do is try to navigate it. Stick around after the break. I'll give you my tips on dominating a toxic workplace and toxic leadership. All right. Welcome back. Again, we honor those police officers who have lost their lives to COVID and in other ways from 2022. And that kind of segues into, dominating a toxic workplace and toxic leadership. I went to a training earlier this year, and it was put on by a world-renowned psychologist from Pennsylvania. And he was talking about relationships with people. And most specifically, he said in some relationships, there's just going to be boulders, right? There's just going to be things that you would waste a lot of energy trying to hammer away and break down, when the real alternative to it is to just walk around it. No different than a beta leader who creates a toxic workplace. In law enforcement, some leaders are going to be in that leadership role for a very long time, especially small departments. That chief of police is going to be chief for the next 15 years, and you have 20 years, or you're just a brand new police officer. You're going to have to learn to deal with them. And so my best advice for that is simply to just walk around them. I've described the two types of leaders that there are in industries. And if you have a beta leader, keep it short and sweet. Understand that this beta leader doesn't have your back. It's not going to have your best interests at heart, and is going to serve themselves and their own goals, which most people do anyway. But when someone in a leadership position does it and it negatively influences the people that work underneath them, it can be tough to deal with. Hello, goodbye. Ultimately what it comes down to is just doing your job. Just do your job. Beta leaders they tend to, unfortunately, find reasons to antagonize those alphas that are beneath them, in subtle ways, passive aggressively, whether it be finding minor flaws in their paperwork, or maybe it's the time that they get to work, or something that they've heard them say about the toxic leader. Just come to work and do your job. If proactivity is something that your department supports, do some of that. If it doesn't, don't. Because the last thing you want to do is be on a beta leader's radar. They're going to come after you. I'm just letting you know that right now. And when I talk about this stuff, I'm speaking from personal experience, not just in law enforcement, but in the other areas of my life where I've worked. It just goes across the board. And it really applies to other industries as well. Nursing, for example. That floor manager may not like you because you are an alpha. Right? And so what are you going to do? The best thing you can do is just do your job. Don't engage them if you don't have to. They're going to try to build a relationship with you, establish some type of rapport. Don't fall for it, right? Because ultimately, they don't mean you any good. The second thing is this. There's always that one person, and we're talking about toxic workplaces now. There's always that one person who is the perpetual pessimist. Meaning, they could be getting honored, getting an award, and after they get the award, they stand on stage, they smile, they shake hands, they come back to their seat, they turn to you, and they complain about the size of the plaque, right? You have to be very mindful of how you interact with these type of people, because their only goal, and in law enforcement, listen, like I know, there are a lot of people who love to complain, even though they are working the country's greatest job, right? If you're shaking your head, yes, go ahead and click the subscribe button, because I'm telling the truth. These people will complain, and then they will turn and try to engage others to join them in their complaining. And then when people do, that's how the cancer spreads. That's how the morale gets torn apart. And now everybody is focused on the negatives. They come to work with no idea of a positive that could happen. Again, even though they're working the country's greatest job. And third, you got to remember why you got on this job in the first place. I got 8 years on, almost 8 years, and I can remember, and I'm sure you can, and it doesn't matter how long you've been on the job, you can remember the night that you graduated from your academy. Or like, my wife and my sister in nursing, the day that you got pinned. Right? I'll be honest with you, I'll be transparent. I went home and laid in the bed with my badge and my diploma because I had finally accomplished something that I never thought was even a reality for someone like me coming from my background. So when I go to work very, cognizant of the fact that what I'm doing is really a privilege. It's not a right. And I only focus on what I can control. If I was in a situation where I had toxic leadership, again, I'm just coming to work. I come to do my job. I come to engage with my, other officers. I try to bring a smile to somebody's face, crack a joke, but I don't engage in pessimism. The job is hard enough on the streets, right? But I've heard from multiple police officers from multiple agencies across multiple states that the biggest challenge comes from within. And that speaks right to what toxic leaders are able to do when they're in those positions. I'll leave you with this. To those leaders who are in positions and they are destroying morale in places, I pray for you. because there's going to come a day where the men and women who work for you are going to rise up against you. And they're going to show you that your position is meaningless without their hard work and their effort.